I believe major characters in Boruto are about to get a somewhat ridiculous power-up. And I have some evidence to prove it. See, I believe that the soul thorns of the shinju are so much more than just the core of some extremely powerful foes. See, because I believe the soul thorns are not just the heart of the shinju, but also the chakra fruit of a failed divine tree. And that chakra fruit can not only be consumed by the person who was initially turned into a shinju, but also maybe the person who their shinju was after. Which means, for those of you paying attention at home, we could see some absolutely massive chakra fruit consumption levels of boost in power to not only those who were bitten by claw crimes, but also those who their shinjus were after. See, the goal of the Otsutsuki is rather well understood. They go from planet to planet with a 10 tails and a lower ranking Otsutsuki, and they feed that lower ranking Otsutsuki to the 10 tails to grow a divine tree. That divine tree then wiggles its roots into whatever planet it's on, absorbing all of the chakra of that planet from not only the planet itself, but all life forms on that planet. And only when every ounce of chakra from that planet is sucked into that divine tree is a chakra fruit formed and plucked by the higher ranking Otsutsuki and consumed to boost their power, to bring them one step closer to a Shibai-esque ascension. But what happens when you alter that Otsutsuki technology? When you take that 10 tails and you split it into hundreds of clones and then place a claw mark shinjutsu on them, embedding them in a sense with the DNA and chakra of Shibai, the one Otsutsuki we've ever known to ascend into a godlike form. Well, then you get the altered claw grimes. And these altered claw grimes are like pure titans in the Attack on Titan universe. They scour the earth trying to bite anybody they can possibly find in hopes that the person that they bite is of Otsutsuki descent. See, because if they're able to sink their teeth into an Otsutsuki, they're able to grow into a complete and beautiful divine tree. The primal and instinctual urge of the 10 tails that they were all split off from in the first place. And thus, even though hundreds of shinjus have been created and scattered across the ninja world, sinking their teeth into any and everybody, none of them have been successful in their endeavor of sinking their teeth into an Otsutsuki and making a full and beautiful divine tree that can soak up the chakra of the entire world. But here's the thing. Everybody in the Naruto world is of Otsutsuki descent in some way or another. And thus, while the trees grown around these bitten ninjas seem to be called failed divine trees, I believe that those failed divine trees still made chakra fruits of a sort. And I believe that those chakra fruit are the key for people like Sarada, Himawari, Konohamaru, and Shinki to get strong enough to battle against high-end Otsutsuki level threats. And honestly, I don't know how it took me until now to notice. But hopefully today you'll notice, because today we're talking everyone's getting a buff in Boruto. But before we get to talking about who's buff and who's not, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video a week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the Forest of Death, and Orochimaru is doing things to scrolls I didn't think anybody could do. Before we get into all that, today I want to talk to you about a brand new sponsor to the page, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is a high protein, no sugar, and great for carb conscious cereal that wants to reinvent your childhood memories of what cereal can be, with the same great taste that you remember, but now with upgraded, grown-up ingredients. With 13 to 14 grams of protein, no sugar, and 4 to 5 net carbs in every serving of Magic Spoon cereal, you get to feel good about what you're eating, while also very much enjoying yourself. And they have a ton of different flavors, whether you're into something fruity, something chocolatey, something frosted, or something peanut buttery. They have a flavor that's got you covered. But if you're on the go, they also have cereal bars, which is a great way to get an injection of protein while I'm out doing things in the world. And these cereal bars that clock in at only 140 calories pack 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and only 1 to 2 net carbs in every single bar. And for only 140 calories, they give you a whole lot of bar. So you leave feeling full and satisfied. Crispy, crunchy, and airy without the stickiness of your standard protein bar. It is the ideal protein bar for the go. So what are you waiting for? Use my code NCHammer23 or click the link in my description to try Magic Spoon's incredible cereal or cereal bars today and get $5 off. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. And Magic Spoon is so confident that you'll love their product that if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money. No questions asked. So click the link in my description or go to magicspoon.com/NCHammer23 or scan the QR code on screen right now for $5 off your Magic Spoon order today. Before we get into this video, let's establish what a chakra fruit is. Well, it seems like a relatively simple concept. Understanding it to the fullest allows us to truly appreciate what's going on with this theory. See, a chakra fruit, explained in the simplest possible way, is an insane amount of chakra condensed into a tiny little package. All of the jutsu, chakra, energy, and life force of an entire living planet condensed down into the size of your palm. And fruits can get larger or denser with power depending on the power of the planet that they were made from. And thus, some chakra fruits are inherently more powerful than others, depending on the chakra that was used to make them. And if that is how we describe and categorize what a chakra fruit is, then there's really no reason for us to believe that soul thorns are any different. See, a soul thorn is also a small, incredibly dense mass of chakra that seemingly holds on to the personality, memories, and powers of every single shinju. We know this because we've seen the shinju completely decimated by attacks. However, they're able to recuperate their entire body simply by interfacing with the tree that is built around their hideout. Simply by having their soul thorn placed on top of the black box in the center of the shinju hideout, somebody like Matsuri and presumably Jura is able to reconstitute their entire body so long as their soul thorn is still intact. And thus, if everything else except for the soul thorn is just tree, then this means the entirety of the personality, memories, jutsus, and powers of a shinju all exist within their soul thorn. And this makes sense because the shinju refer to themselves as divine trees, and that's because effectively they are. But what's interesting about the idea of the shinju referring to themselves as divine trees is that the shinju themselves are made from an attempt to grow a divine tree, and thus it's the failed divine trees of the altered claw grimes that make these now sentient divine trees. And so far as everything in Boruto has told us, that's not how the cycle goes. Divine trees, regardless of how weak they are, end up making a chakra fruit of proportional strength. This is why everyone is so incredibly interested in the earth, at least from the Otsutsuki's perspective, because the earth would make a ridiculously powerful chakra fruit. And this is why when we're first introduced to Momoshiki in the beginning of Boruto or in Boruto's movie, he's consuming a chakra fruit that he says is of medium quality because the planet it came from didn't have that much power. However, this would seem to imply that any divine tree of any level of strength would seemingly be able to make a chakra fruit of proportional strength.
But Nick, the divine trees created by the altered claw grimes aren't actually divine trees because there's no Otsutsuki sacrifice.
Well, that's not necessarily true either. See, not only is all chakra in the entire Naruto universe derived from the Otsutsuki Shinjutsu, as chakra would have been spread amongst the human masses without Hagoromo traveling around the entire earth spreading ninchu, but also the progenitor of human lines like the Senju, the Uchiha, the Hyuga, and the Uzumaki were all Otsutsuki. And thus over the 1,000+ years since Hagoromo and Hamuro were sowing their seeds into every human they could possibly find, the fair amount of crossbreeding that happens in those 14 to 15 generations undoubtedly means that the majority of the human population has some kind of Otsutsuki DNA. And since we know that a weaker Otsutsuki sacrifice makes a weaker divine tree, when you consider that the basis for all of these failed divine trees is not only just the chakra of one person and maybe some of the surrounding area as the tree roots do grow into the ground, but also the sacrifice to make this tree in the first place, which is the human who's being bit, is considered a weak sacrifice, at least by Otsutsuki terms. And therefore, while these divine trees are considered to be failed in the sense I believe is more referring to the fact that they weren't able to grow large enough to consume the chakra of an entire planet. And yet they still created a chakra fruit, the soul thorn. And in the power of each and every single one of these chakra fruits contains the entirety of the power of every shinju they act as the core of. And thus in every single one of these soul thorns is an amount of power greater than the person who was bit to make that soul thorn in the first place. As by and large, the shinju that have spun out of the ninja being bitten by the altered claw grimes have been way more powerful than the ninjas they're based off. And while we don't necessarily have a great level of comparison for people like Bug and his shinju or Moegi and Matsuri, it's pretty safe for us to assume, at least I believe, that Moegi isn't beating Gaara, Ourea, Yodo, and Shinki in battle simultaneously. Ties into the fact that Shinki, when fighting along these three other pretty powerful combatants, wasn't powerful enough to take on Matsuri, but Ryu, Shinki's Shinju, was considered to be stronger than Matsuri, then yeah, it becomes fairly obvious that the Shinju are stronger than the ninja they're based off. So if the Shinju cores contain more power than the ninjas they come from, what happens when these cores are returned to the original ninja? Well, if we assume that soul thorns operate in a principle similar to that of chakra fruits, then basically what this would be akin to would be the original person who was turned into a tree and then a Shinju consuming a low-level chakra fruit. And thus, like with anybody consuming a chakra fruit, these people would see massive boosts to their strength. But do the people who were turned into these divine trees need to be the ones consuming these soul thorns? See, well, most would assume yes here, as the general consensus as to how these soul thorns were created in the first place is that the powers and jutsu of the person who was turned into a divine tree were zapped from their body and turned into said soul thorn, which is why Hidari is able to use things like Chidori and Ryu is able to use things like Iron Sand, and therefore the only way that these relatively important characters are ever going to get their powers back is by having the soul thorn returned to them. The existence of the bug Shinju raises a couple of questions. See, yeah, I don't think any of us would argue that we don't want Sasuke or Shinki or even Moegi to be powerless forever. But the bug Shinju, who absolutely does have a soul thorn, when defeated will essentially just become a fairly powerful chakra fruit. Probably the weakest amongst all the Shinju, but still. And thus this raises the logical question of who would care enough to return this soul thorn to Bug, and who knows where he is to return the soul thorn to in the first place. The only people that have the information necessary to revive Bug would be Code, Ada, and Daemon. However, none of them have the motivation to bring Bug back into the fold, and nobody outside of former members of Kara is gonna care enough about Bug to try and bring him back to life. I mean, sure, he wasn't treated well within the confines of Kara, but he was still a member of Kara, the new gen Akatsuki. Even before he was turned into a Shinju, he was a bad guy, and now his Shinju form is trying to kill the only two people that could even possibly be on his side in Ada and Daemon, two people who, mind you, were completely oblivious to his entire existence. And thus this raises the question of what's gonna happen with Bug's soul thorn. And I believe the legitimate answer here is somebody else is gonna eat it. See, it's important to note here that it may not actually be necessary for the original person who's caught up in a failed divine tree to consume their own soul thorn to be freed. We know from the moment when we met Momoshiki that after a divine tree has its chakra fruit plucked, it wilts away. All of the former divine trees that we had seen grown by Momoshiki and thus had their chakra fruits consumed were broken or wilted in his introduction. And thus, well, most likely if a soul thorn is returned to the failed divine tree and given to the person who's caught up in the tree, they'll be able to break out of said divine tree. I also believe that there is a legitimate chance, just based off how divine trees work, that simply by somebody consuming the soul thorn created from said divine tree will be enough to make that divine tree wither away, hence freeing the person trapped in it. Sorry, it's Friday and I've done a lot of work this week. My voice is starting to go. But Nick, didn't we just say earlier that there's a fair amount of possibility that the person who's trapped in that failed divine tree had all of their powers pulled out of their body to make that soul thorn in the first place? And thus, if that soul thorn isn't returned to the person in that failed divine tree, even if the divine tree does wilt away from their body and they're freed after somebody eats their soul thorn, wouldn't that now mean that they're going to be forced to exist without the powers they previously had? Maybe. I'm not going to deny that that's a possibility. If somebody like Sarada were to consume Hidari's soul thorn, there is a fair to decent chance that Sasuke would be released from the tree, but without powers anymore. However, I don't believe that possibility is nearly as likely as the idea that the person will be released from this failed divine tree just sapped of chakra, and not forever either, just kind of like a ninja at the end of a long battle. See, chakra regenerates, it's life force, it's energy, and divine trees have never been stated to steal anything other than chakra. We know this because almost the entirety of the human population was once caught up in an infinite Tsukiyomi that caused them to be grabbed by a divine tree at the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, and every single individual on the planet for an hour or so was having their chakra pulled out of them by a divine tree. And while the timeline is substantially different for people like Sasuke, who have been trapped in a failed divine tree for years, the scale is also massively different, as the divine tree used in the 4th Great Shinobi World War was a real, legit divine tree, and the divine trees currently encasing people like Sasuke and Moegi and Shinki are divine trees made from a fraction of a juvenile Ten-Tails. But after the entire human population was sucked into a divine tree and almost stripped of their chakra and turned into a white Zetsu army, after being released, each and every single one of them was simply able to regenerate their chakra, simply like they just used a little bit of it in combat, but because chakra regenerates. On top of this, we've seen several times in the Naruto universe that all somebody needs in order to steal or copy the jutsus of somebody else is to either absorb their ninjutsu or simply their chakra, most notably Momoshiki with his Rinnegan palms, an ability that allowed for him to absorb the ninjutsu of others and fire it back at them with his other palm, and thus the ability to copy the techniques of others simply by absorbing their ninjutsu or their chakra is Otsutsuki technology. And as every single Soul Thorn has a Rinnegan on the base of it, this could be how every single one of the Shinju is able to display the abilities of the humans they're based off. See, because here's the thing, we've never actually seen a ninjutsu stealing technique in Naruto. Yes, ninjutsu can be copied, it can be absorbed and amplified and fired back at you, but we've never seen somebody with the ability to strip somebody of their usage of a ninjutsu, and thus not only may the consumption of a Soul Thorn by anybody free the person trapped inside of the failed divine tree, but the person trapped inside of the divine tree may not even need the Soul Thorn returned to them to get back to their original level of power. So, were those who were bitten by claw grimes and turned into failed divine trees chosen intentionally so? I believe so. See, if you think about the people that were turned into failed divine trees, it's a weird cast of people to upgrade the strength of. Shinki, Sasuke, Bug, and Moegi don't all necessarily need boosts to their strength. But when you consider not only the people that were turned into failed divine trees and then Shinju, but also the people that they are actively trying to consume, the people who were chosen begin to make sense. See, Bug doesn't need an upgrade in strength, and honestly, neither does Ada. Ada is a non-combatant. She is an information gatherer, and even though she was introduced as a potential threat to humanity's cause, she's turned out to be about as neutral gets. Not only helping Boruto, but also helping Kawaki and Shikamaru. But if Bug doesn't need a power-up and Ada doesn't need a power-up, then who's getting his Soul Thorn? Well, I believe it'll actually fall into the hands of none other than Daemon. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right now, oh, but Nick, Daemon's already a broken character. And yeah, you're right, he is. With his reflection jutsu, he's already one of the strongest people in the Boruto universe. He really probably doesn't need an upgrade. However, most likely in the upcoming battle between the Bug Shinju and Daemon, some kind of weakness will be exposed in the reflection jutsu. A weakness that the Bug Shinju will try to take advantage of, and therefore a weakness that'll be presented to everybody who ever possibly wants to take on Daemon. And thus, in order to get around this new identified weakness, the one thing that made Daemon stronger than everybody else, I believe Daemon will be the one to consume Bug's Soul Thorn, making him either even more of a ticking time bomb or an even bigger asset to Konoha in high-level battles against the Otsutsuki in the future. However, I don't believe Bug is going to be the only Shinju who has his Soul Thorn consumed by somebody else, as I don't believe Hidari's Soul Thorn is going back to Sasuke. See, we've already spoken several times about how we believe that being absorbed into a divine tree is actually going to heal Sasuke, as very notably, we see that the parts of Sasuke that are sucked into the divine tree are not only his lost arm, but also his lost eye. And thus, while an argument could be made that the returning of the Soul Thorn to Sasuke is what could spurn on his regeneration, I believe that soaking in the power of the Ten-Tails like he's been doing for the last 2 years is gonna be enough on its own. And thus Hidari's Soul Thorn, which is most likely going to be presented to Sarada by Hidari when he realizes that he is Sasuke and he's battling against his daughter, is going to serve as a catalyst to catapult Sarada's strength up into the leagues of Boruto and Kawaki. Because, well, yes, Ohirame is an insanely broken MS ability. As it currently stands, Sarada has no path to either an EMS or a Rinnegan. But when you consider the fact that Hidari's got 2 Rinnegan and his Soul Thorn has 1 of them, I believe that somehow, someway, if Sarada is able to assimilate Hidari's Soul Thorn, it'll open a door for her to get access to either a more sustainable or more powerful dojutsu, whether that being an EMS or a Rinnegan. Now, obviously, the EMS thing is a bit tricky, as for somebody to awaken an EMS, they have to fuse an MS from a family member with their own MSs, giving them essentially 2 sets of eyes. But I genuinely believe this combination of Hidari's power with Sarada's will either give her some sort of access to a Ten-Tails power-based regeneration factor, that allows for her to use her MS like an EMS, or will simply just unlock an EMS or a Rinnegan in one of her eyes. And Sasuke, who was already kind of able to battle against threats like Ishiki and Jigen, with only one arm, coming back with two arms is technically a boost to his strength. And as the story is no longer about Sasuke and now more centric around Sarada, I believe if anybody should be getting the chakra boost that comes along with Hidari's soul thorn, it's not Sasuke, but his daughter. Moving forward with the idea that some people just don't need boost to their power, I also don't think Moegi needs a boost to her power. Yes, is Moegi, the first naturally born wood release user since Hashirama, 100%. And maybe if she was to get Matsuri's soul thorn, she would be able to unlock a near Hashirama level mastery of wood release. And that would be cool. But Moegi is a side character's side character. Well, yes, she is the Jonin leader of the new Gen Team 10, and thus she's kind of like the Asuma of the Boruto universe. It's not like we were giving Asuma crazy buffs so he could help in the battle against Kaguya. We were killing him off. And that's why I don't think it would be a crazy idea to give Moegi a boost. I believe that Matsuri's Soul Thorn Chakra boost is much better utilized in Konohamaru's hands. One, because Konohamaru is simply a more important character, and two, because Konohamaru needs an upgrade way worse than Moegi does. Konohamaru, who is supposed to be the new Gen Kakashi, is one of the most underwhelming characters in Boruto's story. A character introduced in episode 2 of part 1 of Naruto is one of the most useless people in Boruto. A character who's supposed to fill the incredibly large shoes of Kakashi, who's supposed to operate as a big brother to Boruto, the main character of this story, and yet before Konohamaru even got a singular moment to shine, he was already being outshone by all three of his students. As right now, undoubtedly, Sarada, Mitsuki, and Boruto are all stronger than Konohamaru. And thus, if we ever want Konohamaru to take a step into the spotlight and fulfill a role like Kakashi in the battle against Kaguya, he needs an upgrade. And where could that upgrade possibly come from? Well, Matsuri's Soul Thorn. However, will I have a reasoning for Daemon consuming Bug's Soul Thorn and Sarada consuming Hidari's? I do not have solid reasoning to make the argument that somehow, some way, Konohamaru is going to come to the decision to consume Moegi's. And thus, while I do believe Konohamaru needs an upgrade way worse than Moegi, I think when it comes down to it, Moegi's just got a better chance of getting one than Konohamaru, which is just another in the long line of embarrassments for Konohamaru. Really, when it comes down to it, I think the only ninja who is actually gonna see a boost from their own Soul Thorn is Shinki. As we currently know, Ourea is on his way to Shinki's malformed divine tree with Ryu's Soul Thorn in hand, and there's really no reason for us to believe that Ourea would do anything but return the Soul Thorn to Shinki. See, because here's the thing, Shinki is new gen Gaara. However, just like with Gaara, while Shinki was the most powerful genin when this entire new generation were genin, that rank has faltered significantly as everybody else has gotten more powerful and Shinki has remained somewhere in the region of the same. However, in Naruto, that was okay, because while Gaara did get a little bit stronger and therefore was able to take on the role of Kazekage, the threats in the Naruto universe never really scaled beyond what Gaara could deal with. However, Shinki, kind of like any generation existing after the boomers, does not have that pleasure, as life has gotten substantially harder for Shinki and all the generations that exist under boomers. And thus Shinki needs to find a way beyond Iron Sand to be able to contend with crazy high-level threats that Gaara never had to deal with.
Oh, Nick, Gaara had to fight against Momoshiki and Kinshiki.
Not really. Gaara had to fight against Kinshiki alongside 3 other Kage, and Kinshiki is probably weaker than Jubidara and Jubito. Shinki has to battle against Ishiki or higher level threats, and therefore to remain relevant using something like Magnet Release, Shinki needs an insane boost to his power. An insane boost to his power that I believe will come in the form of fusing with Ryu's Soul Thorn. But last, and almost definitely not least, what's gonna happen with Jura's Soul Thorn? I mean, we all know that Jura is after Naruto, but now that Naruto is no longer an option, Jura's after Himawari. And as Jura was derived from the emaciated Ten Tails and therefore has no human to return to, that means Jura's Soul Thorn, like Bug's Soul Thorn, is kind of up for grabs. And when it comes to grabbing, I believe Himawari is gonna be the one who ends with her hand on it. See, as we all know, Himawari is the next generation's Kurama Jinchuriki. She apparently has more connection and more compatibility with Kurama than any previous Jinchuriki. More than Mito, more than Kushina, and more than her father Naruto. In fact, she has so much connection with Kurama that Jura actually said that she was closer to him, a Bijou, than a human. While this has allowed for Himawari to do some absolutely insane things, like instantly fix shattered limbs or bring people like Inajin back from close to death at the end of the day because because Kurama's chakra hasn't had enough time to reaccumulate inside of Himawari, she only has access to but a sliver of Kurama's chakra. However, I do believe that Jura identifying Himawari as close to him means that Himawari might be the best tailed beast vessel we've ever seen. And therefore, if anybody was to take on the Soul Thorn of a 10 tails, I believe Himawari would be perfect. See, because not only would this boost the amount of power she has access to, but it would also round out the chakra she currently doesn't have access to from Kurama, making her in a sense a 10 tails Jinchuriki and immediately thrusting her into relevancy in terms of the power scheme of the universe. Because while Himawari is a different kind of Jinchuriki than we've ever seen before, her being a different kind of Jinchuriki didn't give her a sliver of chance in combat against Jura. Thus, while there was always more power on the horizon for Himawari as more and more of Kurama's chakra came to her, I believe her taking Jura's Soul Thorn would be the way to amplify that power tenfold. But then again, what do I know? Do you guys believe Soul Thorns are going to operate like chakra fruits? And if they are, who do you believe the Soul Thorns are going to go to? Their original creators or somebody else? Tell me about it in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go ice my throat.